Appreciate that.
Thank you. Member for Badram.
Mr Chair, I guess my question's for each of the submitters. How do you reconcile the comments we heard earlier with regards to thermal coal demand either remaining steady or increasing, and the fact that Queensland thermal coals, including those in the Galilee Basin, either have generally higher energy values than our international competitors and superior environmental outcomes as well in terms of those deleterious trace elements?
I'd like first crack at that, if you don't mind. So in relation to the comment from the department that the new policy scenario under the International Energy Agency is consistent with Paris, they were wrong. I think when they check their facts, they'll realise that what they meant to say is the sustainable development scenario is consistent with Paris. In the sustainable development scenario, demand for coal plummets down to about, I think, 0 by 2050. Even in that scenario, they factor in a high reliance on carbon capture and storage, I think 2,000 million tonnes per annum. Currently, all the projects in the world add up to about 30 million tonnes per annum, as QRC note in their submission, so it's well short. In relation to the quality of coal from the Galilee Basin is poor. It varies from 4,000 to I think 5,800 kcal per kilogram. For example, the Adani Carmichael mine is 4,900 kcal per kilogram, well below the 6,000 kcal benchmark of Newcastle coal. So it's low quality coal compared to Australian coal. Even if it was high quality coal, that means you might at best produce 20% more electricity per tonne of coal burnt in the supercritical high efficiency, low emission power station. 20% reduction in emissions. Let's say those power stations last for 30 years. Over 30 years you get a 20% reduction in emission. What we need is a 100% reduction in emissions by 2050. So even if it were true, it is nowhere near enough.
Isn't that a pipe dream? I mean, if we've established that new coal-fired power stations are being built in Asia, as we heard earlier, so they're going to consume coal. The alternative is they consume coal that is of lower quality, say from Indonesia, that will have more environmental damage as opposed to what might come out of the Galilee Basin. So I accept, that your position is that we should have no coal being burnt in the longer term. Okay, that's fine if that's your position.
So, the position of the sustainable development scenario.
So be it. I'm asking the question. Thank you, not you.
One at a time, let the member...
If that's your position, so be it. But how do you reconcile the fact that that product will still be substituted with inferior product from elsewhere in the meantime?
So look, your best case scenario is as coal-fired power stations, many of which 80% of the world's coal-fired power stations are subcritical, or the lower efficiency power stations. As they're retired, they're replaced by these high efficiency power stations. So over that 30-year period, you eventually, assuming they don't burn the Indonesian coal, they burn all Australian coal, you get a reduction. And that is better than the alternative, absolutely. What I'm saying is it's not enough. It's not consistent with 1.5 degrees. It's not consistent with preserving the reef. So it's not enough to rely on that. But I take issue with the fundamental assumption there that if they're not burning Australian coal, it will just come from somewhere else. As I said earlier, if we don't supply the coal, it will increase price, which would reduce consumption. You're also making the assumption that some coal mine in Indonesia or elsewhere will spring into life if we refuse the Galilee Basin. That's a highly uncertain assumption. And you're replacing then an uncertain assumption that it will come from somewhere else with a certain commitment that they'll burn Queensland coal. And I think there's undeniably a moral component to this. You're saying we accept that burning the coal will lead to the destruction.
No, you're saying that, not me.
Well, if you use burn Indonesian coal or coal from somewhere else in the world, and under every scenario that would result in higher than 1.5 degree warming and therefore the loss of the Great Barrier Reef. You're just saying, well, that's going to happen anyway, so it might as well be our coal, is what you seem to be saying. It's going to happen anyway.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is Queensland thermal coal constitutes 5% of supply across the world. So by taking a course of action which extinguishes property rights in one small part of Queensland, that will have arguably no effect on the burning of coal elsewhere because it will be substituted from other sources, that to me is perverse logic.
Well,
Can I just make, through the chair, there's a bit of to and fro here, there, but if we can just address the question, that would be great. And comments through the chair. Thank you.
well, if you accept that, so if you accept that the impact is unacceptable, if burning this coal and resulting in collectively the death of the Great Barrier Reef is an unacceptable outcome, it's not okay for that to say, well, that is an outcome that we don't want, but we think our neighbours will breach the Paris Agreement and not agree to limit their coal supply and consumption below the trajectory necessary for 1.5 or 2 degrees. So we will breach our obligation to keep warming below 1.5 and 2 degrees. I think the safer assumption is to assume the world does what it said it's going to do when 195 countries signed to keep warming below 2 degrees and pursue efforts to keep it below 1.5 degrees, which means the world phasing out coal.
Okay. Thank you.